Welcome to the Truman Charities podcast, a community of caring. I am Jamie Truman, your host. I'm one of the co-founders of Truman Charities. Our organization has raised over $1 million for several different charities as we share our message of helping others and paying it forward. We plan to continue to educate our audience on the culture of giving. On this podcast, I will interview fellow charity founders, volunteers, sponsors, and other people in the community who will share their stories. You will hear and be inspired by their selflessness and passion for helping others. Welcome to another episode of A Community of Caring. My guest today is CEO and founder of Comfort Cases, author of A Forever Home, Fostering Change One Child at a Time, podcast host of Fostering Change, husband and father of 5 children. Rob Scheer. How are you, Rob?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much. By the way, I love the name of your podcast. You know, I truly believe that communities were built for one reason. And when our forefathers built those communities, they built them so we could take care of each other. And I think somewhere along the way, we really have gotten off the path of that. So to hear the name of your podcast, I absolutely love it. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. Yeah, like our tagline was, when good people come together, great things happen. And it's true. When you have good people coming together, community coming together, it's amazing what can happen.
And I truly believe that. And I believe that if you educate your community of a problem, they will solve it. The problem is that most people are not educated when it comes to the issues that are lying within our community ourselves. But I also want to remind all your listeners is that your community, it is not your zip code. It's not your zip code. Your community is our human race. So what affects people in my little town of Darnestown, Maryland, affects people in Austin, Texas. And what affects people in Austin affects people in Rockville, Maryland. And we must understand that. And that's how we make our community stronger. The best thing we want is to have the strongest foundation as possible. And how do we do that? Educate our communities about the issues that we are seeing within our community.
Mm-hmm. It's amazing when I started this podcast that people will come on and listen and say, gosh, I had no idea that this was even going on in Montgomery County. And I'm like, yeah, this is why we're educating you so then you know and you can get involved. So, enough about that. Let's get to you and what you have been able to accomplish. So, Rob, people that don't know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you and your husband, Reese, created Comfort Cases?
Sure. My story is, sadly to say, not different than a lot of children who are in our foster care system. First of all, we have to look at the fact that we have 438,000 children that are sitting in foster care in the United States. And we also must remember something, that children enter foster care because of choices other people made. So for me, my life started out pretty rough. My mother had been married 6 times. I am the youngest of 10 children. We lived in and out of every shelter in Maryland, Virginia, and DC. I don't ever remember a picture on the wall. I don't remember a holiday, and I definitely don't remember a birthday cake. But the saddest part is I don't remember her looking at me and saying, I love you. See, life was pretty hard, but I do remember the monster who lived in our home, and that was my father. In the middle of the night, we would be woken up and, having to move from one place to the next because rent wasn't paid. And, there was a lot of mental illness with my mother and my father. And, for them, kicks would be to line us kids up and get us on our knees and then hold a cold gun to our head and click it and laugh and say, I wonder which child's going to pee on themselves first. And, to me, that was family. That's what I thought every kid went through. I thought it wasn't uncommon for your father to put a cigarette out on your leg because you didn't run fast enough with the Pabst Blue ribbon out of the refrigerator to hand it to him. And I lived through that from the time I was born until I was 12 years old. And when I was 12, my parents died. And it's sad to say it was one of the greatest things that could have happened to me, I thought. I was going in foster care. I had already heard about the word foster care. Some of my brothers and sisters had already started falling to the wayside. You have to know that the statistics with kids who, come from that poverty level that I lived in as a child and going into the system, we truly are expected to amount to nothing. We know that for a fact that almost 80% of our prison inmates have either been in prison, been in foster care, or they have been touched by foster care. And I had already seen my brothers and sisters doing that. I have a brother right now who is serving, life because of a double murder. I have sisters that had teenage pregnancies at 14 and 15, and that's typical within the system. But for me, I was going to my first foster home. I remember walking up the driveway with my trash bag. I remember, yeah, I said it, the trash bag. The fact that we give children who enter the foster care system a trash bag and think that nothing is going to go on in their mind, it blows my mind. And I walked into that home and I remember the foster parents going through my trash bag, which, was nothing more than torn and tattered clothes. And I remember them looking at each other. And I remember them saying that I didn't even have any decent church clothes to wear to church the next day. And I truly needed to get into the shower. I realized at that moment that I was disposable, just like that trash bag. I was invisible. Look at me, acknowledge the fact that I was standing there, but they didn't. Instead, they walked me down the hallway and they told me I needed to get in the shower. I remember walking into the bathroom and shutting the door. And I remember seeing lying in the tub a bar of soap. A bar of soap. I thought at that moment that my life had really changed. Oh my gosh, I wanted to feel that cigarette on my leg from my dad so bad, just because I knew that that was normal and they were there. But instead, I was getting ready to get into the shower and I was going to use a bar of soap for a house full of people that I didn't even know what their middle names were or what was their favorite color. See, the fact is that kids come into the system and go into a house of strangers and we expect them to assimilate immediately, like nothing has ever happened prior. And that's exactly what was expected to me. But I decided that I was going to do it differently, that I was going to be that kid that you really wanted. I would wake up in the morning and I would vacuum the house before I was ever asked to vacuum. I would watch their biological children whenever they wanted to. I unloaded the dishwasher before anyone ever, and I did dishes all the time, cleaned up the yard, anything that they needed, just so that they would look at me and want me and love me. Well, you know what? I was excelling. 13, 14, 15, 16. I could not believe I had made it to high school. Good grades, went to church every Sunday with my foster parents, and I was going to make it. I wasn't going to be the statistics that my community expected me to be. And then it all changed. Never forget it. October 1984. It was 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. I came home from school. And there, sitting in the living room, was my trash bag. My trash bag. I hadn't seen it in years. And it was full. And I remember looking at my foster father and asking him, "What is this?" He says, "You can't live here anymore." I said, "What do you mean?" I looked at my foster mother, who, by the way, I called her mom. I really thought she loved me. And she said, "We're not getting a check any longer because you're 18. So you can't live here." Wow, are you kidding me? I'd been there for years. I was a good kid. I didn't disrespect you. And now I can't live here because of a check? Yep, you gotta go. And I did. And I became a homeless kid. See, the fact is Jamie, we will see 30,000 children age out of foster care this year. And 70% of them will be homeless within 2 years, just like me. That first night was the most scariest night. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go. I was worried that if I told anybody that I would end up in a juvenile detention center like my brothers and sisters had been in. I just wanted to belong. And so the next morning, I hid my trash bag behind the school and I walked into the school. I was a senior. I decided at that moment that I deserved everything else that all the other kids walking down the hallway was getting. And that was an education. I was almost there. See, I'd heard my community talk about that piece of paper, that diploma that if you get that it will change your life. And I knew that no one in my family had ever gotten one. And so every day I would walk into the school. I would hope the kids wouldn't make fun of me because I couldn't tell you the last time I had a haircut, much less had brushed my teeth, or how I'd even taken a shower. I had a job making $3.35 an hour. And by the way, that was minimum wage back then at the local taco place. And the owner found out that I was the homeless kid. And so he would leave the outside bathroom door unlocked so I could sleep there at night. And when I wasn't in school or at my taco job, I was sitting in the public library and I would read every book I got my hands on. I knew then at a young age that if I educated my mind, I could educate my future. I knew then at a young age that I deserved better, but every day it got worse and harder and harder. As the months went by, I was scrawny, I was sick most times, but nobody looked at me. Nobody acknowledged me. As I would sit there in Mrs. Brown's English class and I would watch the guidance counselor pull kids out to talk about their future, no one asked me about mine. See, the fact is if they looked at me, if they acknowledged me, then they would have to admit that they failed me. I would wait for the kids to leave the cafeteria and I would dig through the trash can and I would gather as much food as I could because I didn't know if I would be able to eat that night or that weekend. And that went on until May of 1985. Wow, I made it. I actually made it. I made it to graduation. I couldn't believe it. I remember when they put our caps and gowns on. I remember them lining us all up. I remember you could hear in the auditorium people clapping and screaming. And then they called my name. Exactly. Silence. No one clapped. No one cheered. I walked off that stage with that piece of paper, and I didn't go back to my seat. I went out to the back parking lot, and I sat on the curb. And for the first time, I really remember, I cried. I cried for my mom and dad. God, did I want to feel that cigarette. I wanted to feel the smack of their hands on me. I just wanted them to be there. I cried for my foster parents. How could they have given up on me? For a check. And then I cried for all of you, my community that had failed me in ways that I cannot even imagine. As I brushed myself off and I proceeded to walk the streets for several more weeks, I decided that I had to do something. At that particular moment, I was at the bottom of the well as far down as I could go, and I could see no rope that anyone was throwing me. And so I joined the United States Navy, the military. And let me tell you, to your listeners, I did not join the military to protect any of them. I joined the military because I was scared. I was hungry. And I needed a place to go. And it wasn't going to be behind bars, which is exactly what was expected for me. The military did it for me. It actually gave me an opportunity to be something that I knew I could be, the best. See, the fact is every single one of us have three choices. Choice number one, a kid like me, give up. Give up. I have brothers and sisters that have committed suicide, drug overdose. Give in. Give in. Break the law. Do the things that you know you're not supposed to do and end up behind bars. Or each and every one of us can give it all we got. And that's exactly what I did. I excelled like you wouldn't believe. Got out of the Navy, became a very successful businessman. And I realized my community had done the right thing. My community had taught me the three most important things in the world. Me, me, me. See, The fact is my community had told me that it was all about me and what I got. So, what did I have to get? Well, I was the homeless kid. I had to buy the biggest house I could buy. So you would walk by it, you would stop, you would look at it, and you would say, wow, whoever lives in that house, they are so successful. Then I bought a really expensive car, not one, but two, because I wanted to sit at the stop sign and I wanted you to look at me and I wanted you to say, wow, who's ever in that car, they are successful. And then I filled my bank account so fat I could take all of your listeners to Disney World because that's what it was all about. Gosh, did that change? 13 years ago. 13 years ago, when four of the most amazing humans walked into my life. See, the thing is, Jamie, I knew I always wanted to be a dad. I knew that I wanted to be a dad like I had never had. I knew that I really, really wanted to show a child what it was to truly love them unconditionally. My husband and I had thought we would actually adopt overseas. And it was Reese who said to me, why are we not adopting out of foster care? And I said, are you kidding me? One of those kids? He said, you do know that you were one of those kids. I said, I told you that we don't talk about that. He said, you know, Rob, you're so worried about what everybody else thinks about you. The fact that people might find out that you're not educated and that you don't know the difference between there, and there. And the fact that you have eaten out of a trash can, that you're so worried that they're not going to do business with you or break bread with you. Gosh, he was right. I was so worried about what all you thought. But then there was a whole group of kids who just needed to be loved. And so we filled out the paperwork and decided to adopt one child out of foster care. Little did we know that two of the most amazing kids would arrive first. My beautiful daughter, Amaya, who was 4, with her little brother, Makai, who was 2 years old. I couldn't believe it. They both carried a trash bag. How could this be? How could we be a country that says we care so much about our youth and we still allow them to carry a trash bag? You know, for me, it was making sure that those two kids knew that they were loved, that they mattered, and that that trash bag wasn't going to define them. I remember that very first night with my daughter. I remember I was the happiest guy in the world. I was a dad. I remember as she sat in the tub with all of these bubbles around her, and the only thing you could see is her cute little brown face. And I looked at Reese and said, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life, but I am a dad to the saddest little girl. She's never going to smile. See, Amaya had already been into 3 other foster homes before she had arrived in our home at the age of 4. It wasn't right. As she got out of the tub and put on her little pink robe, and she went into her new bedroom, there my husband had laid 3 nightgowns on the bed. And Amaya went over and she picked one of them up and she tore the tag off of it. And she turned around and she smiled at me. I said, Amaya, why are you smiling? She said, Mr. Rob, I've never owned a new nightgown before. See, that's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable that kids come into the system because of choices other people made, and we can't even give them a new pair of PJs? You know, I just weighed heavy on my heart. But again, I was just trying to be a dad to 2 kids. And little would we know that literally 3 months later, the phone would ring again. The social worker telling us that there were 2 more kids who needed a home. I remember Reese saying, we already have 2 kids. And I said, but Reese, they really need a home. Well, my sons arrived. My son Grayson was 2. His mother was 12 years old when he was born. 12. He came in the system with bleeding of the brain, shaken baby syndrome, and 3 broken ribs. And he came with his little brother who was 6 months old, where his biological mother had taken a razor blade and carved her boyfriend's initials in it. The system. She was a part of it. And they had been a part of it for several months. But now all of a sudden, here are 2 more kids arriving again with trash bags. And now, Here we are, two dads with four kids living in DC, trying to just figure it out. I have to tell you, the listeners that are listening to this podcast and the women out there, you had 9 months. Okay. We did it in 3. We had 4 in diapers and we just did it, because that's what was important. But you know what, Jamie? I still had not figured out what was important. See, for me, as a kid who grew up with absolutely nothing, I wanted to make sure that my children had everything. Mm-hmm. So they had the designer clothes, they went to the private schools, they vacationed at the best resorts. That's what it was all about. And then 9 years ago, I was sitting in my office in Rockville, Maryland. And my husband had come into my office. He's a stay-at-home dad with our children. And he was like, okay, we're ready to plan that toy drive. See, we used to do this big toy drive every year. We'd set up a tent in front of Ben's Chili Bowl, and WPGC would come, which is the local radio station. We'd have all the local celebrities, and people would drive by and drop off bikes, and we would collect thousands of toys. As a matter of fact, if you walk into Ben's Chili Bowl today, you'll see a picture of me and my family hung on the wall, all because of what we used to do in front of Ben's Chili Bowl when it came to the toy drive. But this one particular year, I looked at Reese and I said, I don't want to do it. He says, what do you mean? I said, I don't want to do the toy drive. He said, Rob, everybody counts on this. The kids love to go shopping and buy all these toys. I said, exactly. I said, what are we teaching our children? Are we teaching our children that if you give those needy kids a toy, that it makes life all better? You know as well as I do that on December the 26th, we wake up and the majority of us don't even think about those kids. And by the way, most of the toys, they're already broken. I said, we have to teach our children that as leaders, and by the way, each and every one of us are leaders. As leaders, we must lead by example. He said, what do you want to do? I opened up my desk drawer and I pulled out the one thing that I always keep with me, a trash bag. A trash bag. See, I never want to forget where I came from. Mm-hmm. And I said, Reese, I want to eliminate trash bags in foster care. He said, you are batshit crazy. I said, I know, that's why you married me. We gathered our senior team of employees together, some members of our church, some local politicians, and I stood up for the first time, and I did exactly what I just did with you, Jamie. I told my story. My story. See, the fact is, each and every one of us have one, and we never know how it's going to impact someone's life. As I looked around the room and saw tears rolling down people's eyes, I explained to them how important it was to understand that children in foster care do not belong to you, they don't belong to me, but they belong to us. And if we do not take care of them today, I will promise you, you will take care of them tomorrow because you will just build more prisons. And maybe if we started them out without a trash bag, just maybe, we could see the change in the statistics. The fact is, only 54% of kids in foster care actually graduate from high school. That only 3% get a college education. These numbers are not acceptable. And so, as I told my story, I talked about the brand new pair of pajamas. I talked about that every child deserves their own lotion, their own shampoo, their own conditioner, and their own bar of soap. I know for a fact that most of your listeners will travel within the next year, pandemic or no pandemic, and they will go to a hotel. And when they walk in it, there is a brand new bar of soap. I would love to see them call the management of the hotel and ask them to leave the bar of soap from the people before them that stayed in that room. Get in it and use it. You won't. It's called dignity. And children in the system deserve that. I wanted to make sure that every kid got an activity. Over 93% of the children who are actually in foster care, Jamie, they come in the back of a police cruiser. They go to what we call holding centers. Everybody calls it something different, but they just go and they sit, waiting for a quote unquote bed. We want to make sure that kids who are under the age of 10 get a coloring book and crayons, and kids over the age of 10 get a journal and a pen and pencil set. About 3 years ago, I was filming a CNN special, and I was out in the Midwest, and there was a young boy who was receiving our cases. And I remember as he unzipped the case, as he pulled stuff out, he started to cry. The camera stopped. I went over and I sat down on the floor. And I asked him, why was he crying? He looked at me and said, Mr. Rob, I've been in foster care for 3 years. I've been in 11 homes. He says, the only thing I've ever wanted, as he pulled out his journal, is a journal to write my music in. See, I've had it in my mind every home I went to, and I just wanted something to write it in. Jimmy, it was a 50-cent composition book. But to that boy, it was gold. To that boy, it was his future. To that boy, it showed that his community loved him. And then he asked the question, Mr. Rob, why would someone do this for me? Why would somebody who doesn't know me do this and give me all these new items? I looked at that little boy and I reminded him, like I remind all of your listeners, you do not have to know someone to love someone. You don't. You don't have to know someone to love them. And we need to love our children. And then I want to make sure that every kid gets a book. I don't care what anyone says. The fact is that if you educate a child's mind, you educate your future. Your future. And let's not forget, there is no such thing as a used book. It's only a book that's been loved. When I wrote A Forever Family for my memoir, I will never forget that I remember saying to Simon & Schuster and Derek Jeter, who actually published my book, that I wanted to write the book for 2 reasons. I said, I want to write the book, number 1, for you to love it in your mind. I wanted you to, number 2, love it in your heart. I said, but the most flattering thing that would ever happen to this book is that I see people pass it on. Pass it on. Because that's what we should be doing with books. They should not be sitting on shelves collecting dust. We should be giving them to other people so they can love them as much as we love them. And then I want to make sure that every kid gets a stuffy. I don't care whether you're a newborn or you're 19, even if you're 55 like me. We all love a good stuffed animal. And then finally, every child to get a blanket. See, my son Grayson, who I told you about, was 6 years old when we packed our first case. He said, Daddy, we have to get a blankie in every single case. I said, a blankie? I said, these kids are not cold, Grayson. He says, I know, Daddy. But every time they wrap themselves up in their blankie, they know we love them. Wow, isn't that true? That's what we all want. We want to be loved. We want to know we matter. We're not disposable. And so we started packing cases right in Montgomery County, one after another, after another, after another. And in the last 9 years, because of our community, mind you, because we are a 96% volunteer-ran charity, we have packed over 150,000 cases and delivered them to all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico. And I know I do not have to remind your smart listeners that Puerto Rico belongs to us. See, the fact is that if we lift each other up, we stand taller. We truly stand taller. And that's our story. But as you started out the beginning, Jamie, you said a father of 5. I've told you about my daughter, Amaya, who, by the way, is now 17, a senior in high school. My sweet boy, Makai, who's 15 and a freshman. Grayson's 14 and in 8th grade. And my baby is going to be 13 next week. Well, I was giving a speech in 2019 at a local high school in Montgomery County. I'd just gotten back from part of my book tour, and sure enough, I walked into this auditorium of a high school, and I told my story like I just told you. I could see in my peripheral vision there was a young boy that was getting kind of emotional. But afterwards, the auditorium emptied, and the young boy walked up to me. He introduced himself and told me his name was Alex. I said, Alex, tell me something about yourself. I have nothing to tell. I've been in foster care. I'm 18. I'm an age out, probably homeless like you. I meet thousands of kids all over the country. The way this boy said it to me, it hit me so hard. I said, Alex, it doesn't have to go that way. He said, no, Mr. Shear, that's the way my life is going to go. I've fallen through the cracks. I handed him my business card and told him I had to go give another speech, but I wanted him to call me. That night, I took my family out to dinner, and I told them about meeting this young boy. And one of my kids said, Dad, if he calls, you should invite him to our farm for dinner. So what a great idea. The very next day, Alex called me, and I invited him to our home, called his foster parents. We picked him up. And as I watched him play football in the backyard with my boys and my sister, my daughter, and my husband and I are sitting there, I realized that there was more that we needed to do with Alex. Visit after visit. Within 3 months, Alex moved home to his forever family. Alex has graduated from high school with a 3.6, and he's a sophomore in college right now.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
getting ready to sign his adoption papers. I don't tell your listeners this to pat myself on the back. I tell them because I want each and every one of them to know that by telling your story, because we all have one, it can impact someone's life. And it impacted mine. See, I needed my children, probably more than they actually needed me. But I also knew something. My community, the community that failed me, that I didn't think loved me, that taught me those three important things about the house and the car and the money, I realized I was wrong. See, my community actually did love me. They just weren't educated about kids like me. And when it came to the house and the car and the money, I realized that wasn't what was important. What was important was my family, my community, and my dash. See, some of your listeners have read the poem. Whether you're black or white, rich or poor, male or female, straight or gay, every single one of us on this planet are given the exact same thing. Walk through your graveyards. You see it. The year you're born, your dash, and then the year you die. I want my dash to shine. I want my dash to be so bright that my children walk by it and say, my dad, he didn't talk about it. He actually did it. Thank you.
Oh, I love the dash. And honestly, listening to your story, and I heard it first when you did your TED Talk, which is fantastic. And I would love everybody to watch it as well. But the story, just being a mom, and I have 3 kids, and actually right now, 2 of them are sick. And just the thought of a kid being sick and not having a parent to take care of them and to hold them and hug them. And when I heard the story about Grayson and why he chose to have a blanket in these cases, it was so moving because I was like, I can't imagine my kids, not having someone to hug them if they don't feel well or not having a safe place to come to. So how does it feel for you to know that you have started this and it's 150,000 cases?
I know. Crazy.
Gone out to children.
So when the height of the pandemic hit us in March, I will never forget it. Waking up and none of us knew what the hell to do, what was going to happen the next day. And the only thing I kept thinking about is 700. See, that's the number of kids at average that come into foster care every single day is 700 kids. And I thought about the fact that those 700 kids go through a pandemic every single day with or without COVID. And so I decided at that moment with my husband and my team it was time for us to expand even more. So in the last year, we are no longer just a based U.S. company, nonprofit, but we're actually international. And so we've opened up a center in the United Kingdom. We have realized that there are 84,000 kids in foster care in the UK, which, by the way, they carry trash bags just like our kids do. And so for me, it's just the legacy to continue on. I gave up my banking job to be a public speaker because I truly believe that it's my responsibility to go around the country and teach people about kids in foster care, to give the 120,000 kids who actually are waiting to be adopted. So we have 438,000 kids in our system, but we actually have roughly 120,000 kids whose parents' rights have been severed and they're waiting for adoption. These kids average at the age of 6. And so I think it's so important that I took my pain and made it into purpose. And by the way, those who read my book, A Forever Family, they're going to find out that, my life wasn't always that great. I mean, I've had 4 suicide attempts. I suffered from drug addiction. I don't want people to think that I just woke up one day and was this happened. No, it was a struggle. Lots of therapy, which, by the way, I still go to, and I love my therapist. But the fact is that you have to realize that the mental damage that is done to a child from that utero to 2 years old is so, so important. And most of these kids, as you just said, they haven't been loved. They haven't been hugged, and then a lot of them, because we don't have enough homes that are opening up their doors, these kids are going into group homes and they're like, no one to tuck them in at night. I'll never forget it. I've not shared this story, but with just a few people, Jamie, but I'll never forget when Alex moved home. Alex was 18 years old. He really had not had a family. He didn't know about having that whole, the nucleus of a family and the love that you have. And every single night when I'm not traveling, I go around the house and I always say the same thing. Good night, Amaya. Daddy loves you. And my daughter will say, I love you. Good night, Makai. Daddy loves you. Makai will say, I love you. Good night, Grayson. Daddy loves you. Grayson will say back, I love you. Good night, Tristan. Daddy loves you. And Tristan will say, I love you, Daddy. And then I would go to Alex and I'd say, good night, Alex. Rob loves you. And I did that day after day after day. Alex never said anything back. I'll never forget about 2 months after he had lived with us, as I went around and said goodnight, and I love each one of my kids. I said, good night, Alex. Rob loves you. And he looked up at me and he said, Pops, I love you too. Wow.
Oh my gosh. How'd that make you feel?
Gosh, my heart smiled.
Yeah.
Because I could tell that he felt it and that he needed to say it when he was ready to say it.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is that we all have love in our heart. It's just, how do we do it? How do we give it? Why should we give it? I tell people all the time, you don't have to have a lot of money to make an impact in your community. We all have the most valuable thing in the world, and that's time. Mm-hmm. Donate your time. At Comfort Cases, we have a national center right in Rockville, Maryland. Volunteer and come and pack some cases. For some reason, as humans, we tend to go on vacation and we tend to collect all of the lotion, shampoo, and conditioners and bars of soaps from the hotel when we don't use them and take them home and put them in a drawer like we're really going to use them. I always tell people, clean those drawers out and bring them to Comfort Cases. We could actually use them. They're great sizes for our Comfort Cases. I also remind everybody, each and every one of us have books on our bookshelves that we're not going to read again. Donate them to Comfort Cases. And the next time you want to go to that overpriced coffee shop, the one that I even visit, I say, take your children to Target or to Walmart and buy a pair of pajamas and donate them to Comfort Cases. See, Jamie, we must understand one thing. Empathy is something we're not born with. We're not born with empathy. It's not in our DNA. Empathy is taught. It's taught. Mm-hmm. And we must teach it at a young age. What other way than kids helping kids?
So for the listeners that want to help, so they can come and they can help with comfort cases, and then you can help donate. And is there anything else?
Oh my gosh, spread the word. Love us on social media. Go to comfortcases.org, get our newsletter, follow us. The fact is that we've been so unbelievably fortunate when it comes to our community. We actually get donations from every state. We track our donations. We get donations from every continent except for Antarctica because the penguins just haven't figured out how to donate yet. But each and every one of us can do something. Become a bag buster. I mean, for $10 a month. And by the way, most of us who are listening to this podcast are not going to miss $10 a month. But for $10 a month, I am able to eliminate a trash bag for a child, by giving them what we call a Comfort XL, which is a 32-inch duffel bag. So you can sponsor a child and give comfort cases every single day in our center, 6 days a week. We are packing cases and shipping them out because we must understand that every single day, 700 children arrive in our system. But I want to remind people that we, again, are a 96% volunteer-ran charity. When you look at our 990s as a 501c3, people are shocked because nonprofits just don't do that. They have such big overheads. We don't. Because I truly believe that nonprofits are supposed to do for their donors like I would do in my businesses. And that is to invest as much as you can into that mission. And our mission is to give hope and dignity to our youth in foster care.
I do love that because wherever you go onto your website and when you're speaking, you're always saying restoring dignity to foster children. And I think that's exactly what you're doing. And I love it. So I know there's a lot of businesses too. So in organizations like Bethesda Country Club in the Montgomery County, and there's a couple different organizations that have donation bins. So now when we're talking and you're talking, you need shampoos and you need soaps and you've talked about travel sizes. So is that what you're looking for? The small?
Yes. Let me tell you something. Every single child needs to assimilate into their new family. Okay. And so we want that. So we, every single item that we have put in our comfort cases, we really have put a lot of thought behind it. So, by doing the larger shampoos and lotions and conditioners, there's a couple of things. Number one, they're very heavy. It costs us so much for shipping. So, and we ship these cases, 50 cases at a time from birth up to the age of 19. Social workers are able to go to our website and order the cases. We do not charge. The only thing we do is we make them make a commitment. They'll never give a trash bag to a child in foster care. But you are right. I mean, we do have bins all over Montgomery County and actually all over the country where people are doing these drives for us. And so, yes, travel sizes are absolutely the best. So if you are going to Bethesda Country Club or, right now they're doing a big drive, which, by the way, they've been our partners for many years. And that's the thing that I love. I absolutely see corporate responsibility is something that we all must make sure corporations are doing. I want to work, stand next to, and support a corporation that supports my community. It doesn't support their bottom line, supports my community. And that's something that Bethesda Country Club has been doing for years. They do this huge drive. We all get together. We're going to actually get together in January. January 15th, I think, is the date that we've picked. And we'll all get together. And what we've done now is we actually allow people to come to the center on that day. So we have drop-off donation days and everybody's able to do a tour of our national center. And, again, I just love the fact that when you educate your community, they will demand change.
And they do show up.
They do.
And they show up. And I do want to let the listeners know, too, that in December, Truman Charities is going to have a happy hour at Tommy Joe's from 5 to 8, and we're taking donations for comfort cases. I'm very excited about that.
Let me tell you, I've known about your organization for many, many, many years. Since you first started it, I was so impressed. And, I will tell you, I've always wanted to be connected with you and your husband and your charity. And when you reached out to me, I mean, people in my office, my team were like, you would have thought that it was Ellen again calling me and asking me to be on the couch with her again. Just because I respect you all so much, because what you do, you don't have to do. And you don't get anything out of it, but the fact of educating your community about so many organizations out there that truly need the support. And so I can't thank you enough for picking Comfort Cases for December. I can't wait. I was actually telling my husband last night, I was like, we're going. I was like, this is so exciting. And so, yeah, thank you so much.
You are the best. We've been following you for years, and we love what you guys do. And so before I let you go, because I know you are very busy, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would want people to know?
Wow. I think we covered a lot, but you know what? Again, I want to remind each and every one of your listeners, besides the fact of going to comfortcases.org and reading more about our organization, or maybe picking up a copy of A Forever Family, which, by the way, 100% of the proceeds go to Comfort Cases, I want you to remember something. And I said it earlier. You don't have to know someone to love someone. And that's what we must remember. And we must love children in the foster care system. We have to. Thank you, Jamie.
Oh, thank you so much, Rob. And thank you to everyone that took the time to listening to this podcast. And until next time, thank you. If you would like to learn more about our organization, please follow us on Facebook at Truman Charities or Instagram at Jamie_Truman Charities, or check out our website, trumancharities.com. I hope you enjoyed listening and hearing stories of selflessness and caring. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.